Algebra 2. Today we're going to start the second unit. It's on monomials and polynomials. And we're going to look at some definitions, some vocab first, and then some rules that we're going to have to learn based on monomial polynomial rules from the past. And you have had this in Algebra 1. Okay, first one is monomial. Mono, the prefix is one. Monomial means one term that can be a number, variable, or product of both. It can be a number, it can be a letter, or it can be like letter and number together, and they're all monomials. Polynomial is many terms, and they're added or subtracted together. So basically, it's poly means many, so it's many monomials added together or subtracted. So here's a couple examples. 24 plus 2x. And so like 24 is the first term, it's called a monomial. Well, 2x is also a monomial, but when I put a plus sign in between, it now becomes two terms, two separate terms, and that forces it to be a polynomial. So anything that has many terms. And a good way to tell is just look for plus and minus signs, those separate terms. Second example is 12 minus 3y plus 5z. You have three terms separated by subtraction and plus sign. Third definition is coefficient. Coefficient is the number being multiplied by the variable, and it's usually written in front of the letter. So like for example, negative 17x. Well, negative 17 is the coefficient. A constant, when you hear me say that word, I'm just referring to a number without a variable. So in the example that you see on your screen, 2x plus 8y plus 10, 10 is considered the constant because 10 does not have a letter attached to it. Keep in mind from Algebra 1, when you see 2x, that means 2 times x, plus 8 times y, and plus 10. Obviously, I would not be able to add these three terms together because they do not have the same variable. There are three terms on the board. Just reviewing the concept from the last slide, that is a polynomial. Polynomial. It has many terms. Okay, the next big concept is on the monomial rules. So what we're going to learn is how we take one-term problems and multiply them. And so when you hear me say product, that is the multiplication rule. Alright, and here's what the product rule says. It tells you to do two things. You are to multiply coefficients and add powers on the same variable. Multiply coefficients and add powers on the same variable. Okay, power rule. Power rule tells you to multiply power outside parentheses by all powers on the inside. And so what I'm going to do right now is look at some examples with you, so that way you know what I'm referring to. So we'll start here with example 1. So product rule, if I give you, we'll start off with an easy one, x to the 4th times x to the 8th times x to the 2nd. Okay, each one of these are monomials. They fit the definition, one term. When I put times signs in between, I'm asking you to use the product rule. That tells you to multiply coefficients. Now the coefficients are the numbers being multiplied by the variable, and they're usually written in front. So when I look at this one term, I don't see a number here, but we learned from Algebra 1 that it's understood 1. Same deal with the second term. and the third term. And so we're going to multiply 1 times 1 times 1, and the answer is going to be 1. We're then going to add powers as long as it's the same variable. All of these have x's, so now we're going to add 4 plus 8, which is 12, plus 2, which is 14. So 1x to the 14th is the answer to that question. Okay, number 2. Negative 15, a to the 4th, b to the 2nd, c, times 10, a to the 7th, c to the 4th. Okay, it's important to notice what I'm underlining. I have underlined one term. That is considered a monomial because it has a number and it has a variable or variables actually attached. It does not matter how many letters I give you. If everything is multiplied together, and I don't see any plus or minus signs here to separate them, if everything's multiplied together, that's a product, and that means it's one term. This is the second term you see on the board in this example. I'm asking you to multiply the monomial, first monomial, by the second one. I know it's multiplication because I'm using parentheses, and we're going to follow the rule. And again, the rule says multiply coefficients. Coefficient is the number in front or being multiplied by the variables. So in this case, it's negative 15 times 10. And all you got to do is jot down your answer. Once you have the rules in your head, these are super easy. Then you're going to add the powers on the same variable. And please notice that I have different letters. The first one I have a to the 4th and a to the 7th. And so all I've got to do is drop my a term down, and I've got to add 4 plus 7 and call it 11. Next I look at the b. This first monomial has b to the 2nd, and the second monomial doesn't even have a b. But we are multiplying these together, and so because one of them has a b term, you have to drop it down. And you're just going to recopy it. That's b squared. Then you're going to multiply c to the 1st times c to the 4th by adding their powers. C to the 1 plus 4 is 5. And so this would be the answer to the second example. Multiply coefficients, add powers as long as it's the same letter. And remember, monomials is what we're focused on right now. Monomials are one-term problems. It can be just a number, just a letter, a number with one letter, a number with 15 letters. As long as everything's multiplied together, it's a monomial. Power rule. You're going to multiply the power outside by all the powers on the inside. So we're going to do a few examples here. Make sure you're writing all down. So let's start off with a simple one. Let's do y to the 12th. We're going to put parentheses around that and then a big 3 on the outside. Okay, now the power rule is actually a version of the product rule. You learned early on that powers is just a shortcut way to write multiplication. In other words, if I say 5 squared, that's the same thing as 5 times 5. This is saying y to the 12th raised to the 3rd. So you could, and this is the long way, but I am going to show you because some people think of it like this. You could write out y to the 12th 3 times because that's what that power is telling you. There's 3 of them. if you think of it this way, then what you've done is you've taken a power rule problem and you've turned it into a product rule problem. So like this one looks very close to example 1 from the last rule. So if you choose to do that, then you're using the same rule each time. You're going to multiply coefficients. Again, I don't see anything, so there's 1's here. I'm going to multiply 1 times 1 times 1 and drop it down. I'm going to drop down my variable, and then I'm going to, it says add powers in the same variable. So I'm going to add 12 plus 12, which is 24, plus 12 more, which is 36. So this is me using the product rule. Alright, now what I'm going to do is write the same problem down and show you the power rule and how much faster it is. It's a little shortcut. So you can use this rule when you see a power on the outside of parentheses. The rule says to multiply the power outside of parentheses by the power on the inside. So you're going to get y to the 12 times 3, which is 36. You see how much faster that is. This is okay too. It's fine if you have to picture it that way. You really need to know both. Okay, example 2. Now we're going to throw in a number. We're going to do 6x to the 5th, and we're going to raise it to the 4th power. Now, just like the last one, you can write 6x to the 5th down 4 times if you want to, and then just use the product rule. But the power rule is the shortcut. The power rule again says multiply the power outside parentheses by all powers on the inside. So you're going to technically multiply the 4 times the 5. And then this part is extremely important. It's a common mistake, so please listen closely. You also have to multiply the 4 times the power on the 6. And numbers have powers as well. If you don't see an exponent on a number, it is 1. 6 is the same thing as 6 to the 1st. Okay, so if I'm doing the power rule this time, you drop the base down. The base is 6. You multiply 1 times 4, and you drop that down. You drop your x down. You multiply 5 times 4, and you get 20. 6 to the 4th. That's 6 times 6 times 6 times 6. And the answer to that is going to be 1,296. Just for that little piece. And then you have to drop down the x to the 20th, attach to it, and that's your answer. And remember, when you're doing the power rule, you're multiplying power outside by inside powers. Okay, also notice my answer. It is still one term. It's still a monomial. And I have a coefficient which is attached to the front. The coefficient being multiplied by the x. Okay, example 3. -3 a to the 7th b. Let's raise that to the 2nd power. Let's see what happens. So we have power outside parentheses. That's your first clue, that it's going to be this rule. Okay, your job is to multiply again for the 3rd time all the powers outside by the powers inside. Keep in mind, number has power as well, and the b also has a 1. So you're technically supposed to take the 2 and multiply it by the 1, and by the 7, and by this 1. And so here's what it's going to look like. You're going to drop down the number first. Now, I suggest you always put the number in parentheses. If you forget that, you will make a mistake in the calculator. So please use parentheses. You're going to drop the number down. 1 times 2 is 2. You're going to bring your A down. 7 times 2. You're going to drop your B down. 1 times 2. Negative 3 quantity squared. If you grab your calculator right now, type in negative 3 squared without parentheses, and then type in negative 3 with parentheses around it and square it. Okay, if you've done what I've asked and you've used your calculator, you see that when you type it in as negative 3 squared, the calculator says negative 9. If you use the parentheses around negative 3 and then square it, it says positive 9. That is the right answer. And so that's the reason I made that comment. When you are working especially with negative numbers, please make sure to draw your parentheses there so you don't make or miss the problem just because of that. And you'll drop your letters down. And so 9a the 14th b the second is your answer. Again, this is one term. I see no plus or minus signs. Everything's multiplied together. That's called a monomial. 9 is the coefficient, and 14 and 2 are my powers. All right, let's try one where I'm mixing the two rules up. So let's go with a negative 2 x to the 10th, y to the 6th, raised to the 3rd, times 5, x, y to the 4th. Okay, in this problem, you are to notice that the monomial has a coefficient of negative 2, has power on x and a power on y. Your job is to put a power on the negative 2. You're then going to take the 3 outside the parentheses. You're going to do power rule before you do product rule. You have to do powers before you multiply. Think about PEMDAS. Exponents come before multiplication. So this has to be taken care of first. You're going to drop down your base, which is negative 2. It is a negative number. You're going to put parentheses around it. You're going to multiply 1 times 3 and drop the 3 down. You're then going to bring down your x. You're going to multiply 10 times 3 and call it 30. You're going to drop down your y. You're going to multiply 6 times 3 and call it 18. Alright, so that is just the power rule. Now we're going to keep this separated, so I'm going to put another parentheses there, and I'm going to drop down the next term. This one I don't see a power on the outside, so I don't have to do that. Okay, before you continue and do the product rule, this must be simplified. So you're now going to do negative 2 in parentheses cubed. You may use your calculator if you have to. That's just saying negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. That's going to be a negative 8. Okay, you got x to the 30th, you got y to the 18th. I'm going to drop it down and drop down the second term. Alright, now you're going to notice there's no power on the outside here. We have simplified that piece, and now what's left to do is, looks like multiplication. I see parentheses. We're now going to go back and follow the product rule, which was our first rule for today. Product rule says multiply coefficients. Add powers on same variable. Multiply coefficients. A coefficient is the number being multiplied by the letters, so it's a negative 8 times 5. It's going to give me a negative 40. You're going to drop your x down. Then you're going to add your powers. This one's a 30, and this one has a 1. So you're going to say 30 plus 1, which is 31. You're going to copy down your y, and you're going to add 18 plus 4 to get 22. And so this is your final solution. Excuse me. So all we've done today is look at some definitions. We have to know words in order to understand what's going on. The key word in this unit so far has been monomial. We're working only with one-term problems. It can be just a number, just a letter, or a product of both, where like everything is multiplied together. I introduced you to the word polynomial as well. We'll come back to that later. We looked at the word coefficient, meaning the number in front of the variable, and we looked at the word constant, meaning the number that's by itself without a variable or without a letter attached. There are actually 5 monomial rules in this unit, but I only looked at 2 with you today, so we're going to practice these. First one is the product rule. That is when you see a times sign, like a dot or parentheses in your problem. You're going to multiply coefficients, and you're going to add powers if it's the same letter. If you have a power on the outside of parentheses, you are to follow power rule. It is a shortcut version of the product rule. It allows you to get to the answer fastest. So you're going to multiply the power outside by all the powers on the inside. Please again be careful when there are numbers involved, because you have to remember numbers have powers as well, power of 1, and you're going to have to multiply the power on the outside by that also. And then last comment, I've said a couple times already, please use parentheses, especially around negative numbers, so that way when you're typing it in your calculator, you are getting the right answer. Okay, so we'll give this a try. So your practice is going to be on product rule and power rule, and making sure you understand those.